Hello, and welcome to well, I guess this isn't a week, this is just the August 9th recap for last week. So we have 2 weeks out. I mean, the semester will start in 2 weeks for those of you who are still at CSN. Good. Well, hopefully you guys are all getting ready to go and are refreshed a little bit from your break. I will be starting again with, PCS 101, PSC 101, sorry. And I'll be teaching this. And so in 2 weeks, you'll see the format change back to what you're used to during the course. And so the with the exception, I'm not going to bore you with the ongoings of the course. I'm just going to include the new section. But again, I wanted to keep true to my word, and and keep up with the news. This is stuff that I keep up with, and if you guys want to hear it, then by all means. So let's talk about the first thing, and is TikTok. Donald Trump announced that there's two executive orders. One is to ban TikTok within 45 days. Um, and so this is going to, why would you ban a social media app? One, I'm just full disclosure, I understand very little about TikTok. I'm old, I'm 40, and I don't do social media. And I don't really know how it functions. I know it's a new social media platform. Is I don't know much about it, but the idea around banning this is because it's a national security threat, because TikTok is a Chinese the parent company is a Chinese company, and every Chinese company is beholden to the Chinese government because they are a socialist or communist country, and they can absolutely take that data if they want. So what any social media platform does is it collects data, and if that data can then get into the hands of someone who's our adversary, that's a problem, right? There's no evidence, however, that has happened, right? And I think TikTok has even opened up their algorithm to the government, has done other things. I forget what other measures they've gone. They've gone to great the U.S. affiliate has gone to great lengths to show that this is not currently happening. That being said, it could happen. So it's certainly a distinct possibility, and that's a problem, right? And so it hasn't been there hasn't been an app that's taken off as big as TikTok, since well, apps have been a big thing, right? And so what this does is creates a dilemma, right? What does the government do? Do you allow a foreign-owned subsidiary of an app that collects data on American citizens? Then it might be benign, but you don't know. Or do you allow it to happen and hope that nothing bad comes of this? It's the same with Huawei in 5G, right? Well, there's no evidence that Huawei is piggybacking Chinese malware on it, but nevertheless, we don't know that, and that's certainly a problem. China is not exactly a good actor internationally, and so they do a lot of really bad things. And so, is Trump right to do this? Depends on your perspective, right? I think there's justification for it, and it's certainly something that we the threats we should take seriously. But then again, you have Trump is interfering with the economy, interfering with a private corporation, and there might not be a justification for this. Now, Microsoft has been trying to buy this, but that's a long way off, and so whether this happens or not, we'll see. So this leads into my next point about further Trump executive orders. Donald Trump is he uses executive orders quite a bit, and mostly because the government's paralyzed and he's not very popular with Congress and his own party even, and so that's why he uses executive orders quite a bit. And he issued some more in response to the failure of the White House / Senate Republicans, and him agreeing to for the stimulus. But we'll talk about that in a minute. And so, what did he do? He took it upon himself to do so. So he issued some executive orders. Some he has the authority to do. Some he doesn't look like he has the authority to do. One was to institute I think it was a $400 a week $400 a week, you know, stimulus or unemployment benefit in addition to current benefits. Can he do that? Probably not. You can't. The government just can't. There is some money that can be moved around within the federal budget. You can't just do it because you want to, right? There's real limitations to that. Congress allocates the budget, and you just can't move money around because you want to move it around. So that's one thing. The other thing he did is, I think, is a payroll tax, moratorium on that. He can probably delay it. I don't know if he can absolve it. Taxation is done condemned by Congress. He can't just say, I'm not going to do this, right? That's probably not something he could do. Student loan moratoriums, that's something he probably can do based upon the law. So there's some things he can do, some things he can't do, and it will be interesting to see how the Democrats respond. It's actually a fairly interesting move by Trump, and I think I actually kind of applaud him for the political gamemanship here, because it's going to put the Democrats in a bind, right? Do they sue him and stop this when, this is something that is needed, right? We need stimulus because the government has shut down the economy, right? And so you need to pump money into it, and the person who's best able to do so is the federal government. And so you're going to need to do this at some level. And so do the Democrats sue and stop this, and then you further have economic fallout, or do they just let it go? This is an executive overreach, and so I don't know if the Democrats will just say, "Hey, this is bad. You shouldn't do it," and just not sue. Republicans can sue as well, but I don't see that happening. And so, I don't know what Nancy Pelosi is going to do. She said today that she's upset about this, that this is unconstitutional, which for the most part some of it is. Nevertheless, congressional leaders are meeting with the White House, not Senate Republicans, to hash out a deal, and they haven't gone anywhere. And when the people left in the lurch are the American people. Moving on, which is at least my next point, is Congress and stimulus aid or COVID aid. They haven't reached agreement. Senate Republicans have not been a part of the negotiations, which is interesting. In part, probably because they're so divided. Some don't want aid, some don't. Some want it. Some want the economy just to be opened, and so there's a wide dearth of different responses from Republicans, and they're not united. And Mitch McConnell has acknowledged that. And so the White House is taking the lead, which is actually something they should do. The role of the White House is to be kind of the head of the party and to lead the party. And if they're not going to do that in the Senate or the House, then it's up to them. And that's actually this is what the president ought to be doing, or at least the office of the president. And so the Democrats want, I think, $3 trillion. Republicans want $1 trillion, which is a lot of money. There's, Democrats want money going to the states, frontline workers. The Republicans want protections from businesses. Eventually, they will reach a deal. There's a little doubt about that. I think it's hard to place blame when both sides are unwilling to budge. And they're all going to say, oh, this, both sides are going to say, well, look at these people are, the Republicans aren't doing their job, and Democrats are saying, well, they're not going, and Republicans are going to say, well, the Democrats are not doing their job. They're both right, and they're both wrong. They each have their own perspective. There's valid positions for each perspective. So a deal will be reached. My guess is probably this week at some level, and then whether they vote on it, when they vote on it, I don't know. I think Congress is at a session right now. We'll see when they vote on it. They might call a special session to do so. Moving on, election interference. So there's a report by the intelligence community saying that people are trying to influence the election, and this is not a new thing. Just the level at which they're doing it is new, and it's very concerning. Russia obviously wants Trump in office. Trump has reduced America's exposure on the international stage, and he's reduced our footprint, which has been very beneficial to Russia. Trump has not been as the administration has issued many sanctions against Russia. So as a policy perspective, they haven't been that divergent from the Obama administration. Or they've been divergent is just basically backing out the international community, which has helped Russia. On the flip side, China would love to have a Biden presidency. Trump has been quite harsh on China, and China is again to Donald Trump's to compliment Trump at some level. China's a bad actor. China's not a nice actor. Then again, Trump's way of pursuing change in China has been ham-handed, pretty extremely problematic. But China would love to have a Biden presidency. Biden this last week, I mean, I'll talk about it in a minute, said that he would undo the tariffs on China. He basically would restart Chinese China trade negotiations back at square one. And so that so the Chinese are looking to interfere as well. There's everyone has their own perspective and vested interest, and so that's going to affect what the outcome they want. So it's absolutely going to happen, and it's bizarre to me to think that certain people, conservatives more than anyone else, I think I would argue, deny this is happening. This is absolutely, I mean, it's demonstrably being done, and it's just, I don't know why people would deny this, and then the fact that they don't want to think that their guy didn't win. I mean, I don't think I never thought it detracted from Trump's win. I think that's a hard argument to make because Trump didn't win just because of Russian meddling. He won for a variety of reasons, and to make the argument that was the one reason, it's kind of ridiculous. And so Trump himself hates that argument because it means he didn't win on his own merits, which I don't agree with that argument. I think he did win largely on his merits the lack of how terrible of a candidate Hillary Clinton was. And so, anyways, okay. Trump and Twitter. I think Trump and Twitter actually and Facebook as well. Trump had some tweets deleted this last week, mostly because they are grossly scientifically inaccurate. This is a problem for Twitter and social media. Trump speaks off the cuff, and I don't think he intends on lying or dissuading people. I think he gets these ideas in his head, and he just kind of speaks to hyperbole. I think hyperbole is probably the best term I can use for Trump. Accuracy and is just not something he does well, and that's a criticism. It's definitely a criticism, but it's also, it's also defensive of him because he doesn't seem to ever think before he talks, and I think taking his statements at face value is problematic, and I think sometimes his intent isn't always clear, and sometimes he's been hit harder than he deserves for certain statements that are either obviously jokes or just unintentional, right? Or much more nuanced than the one-liner has made out to be, the sound bite. So, but in this instance, Trump said something to the effect that kids couldn't get COVID, which is absolutely not true. As a parent, that is not true. And the problem is that's dangerous. Such ideas, people will listen to that and think this is, my kid can't get it. There's a mom early on in the pandemic. I remember reading an article about some mom who would take her 1-year-old out everywhere, and eventually her 1-year-old got it. She's like, I didn't think kids could get it, and because she read somewhere that kids were less susceptible to it, and in her mind that meant they couldn't get it. And so those type of nuance in people, or just lack of understanding of what the science is problematic. When the president of the United States tweets something to that effect, as a social media company, they have to act. They probably don't do it because they want to, but this puts them in the crosshairs of the administration. But because this violates their norms, and so, or their rules, and so this is problematic for them. This is extremely difficult for them, and I think Trump just kind of speaks from the hip and doesn't really think. Okay, moving on. Minneapolis put their plans to disband the police department on hold, and I point this out not because this is a good or bad thing. I pointed out to show the complexity of how hard it is to do something as complicated as that. Here you have an instance where a police officer, killed George Floyd, and the people who saw the video, it doesn't seem to be justifiable anyway. And there's a lot of anger, rightful anger, justifiable anger about this, and the city decided to disband the police department. It doesn't mean to get rid of the police department altogether, just they want to start over again. And now what you're seeing, is that anger, all that frustration is starting to dissipate to normal levels, and they're showing that there's people who want to keep it because they're fearful or because they have different other vested interests, and it's starting to become complicated. The longer you delay any action, the less likely it's going to happen bureaucratically, right, or through a legislative process, because you have various actors getting involved, and there's a concept called path dependence, and I talked about in the course, where the cost of diverting from a given path, is quite expensive. There's a certain cost associated with that. So, for example, you look at your keyboard. The first four or five letters on the keyboard are QWERTY, QWERTY, right? And that's actually taken from a typewriter, and it's actually our keyboards we currently use are designed so you write inefficiently. The reason being that if you type fast on a typewriter, the keys get stuck. And I grew up before, computer. Right when I was starting school, there was, we didn't have a computer, so we typed on a typewriter. And you type too fast, the keys get stuck. And so we have our layout for keyboards are actually intended to be inefficient. The reason why we haven't switched over is because everyone knows how to type on a QWERTY keyboard, and the cost of transition is greater than the benefit. The same applies to the pound versus metric, all these type of things. And so when you have a system like a police department, to change that system is immensely costly, and the cost of change might be greater than the cost of just leaving it. And now we have issues of path dependence here, and so will they eventually change it? It's hard to say now, as things get delayed and people and the anger dies down. There's less motivation to do something. It becomes much more difficult, and this happens in all parts of life, right? There's a study done on police shootings, on mass shootings, and when legislation gets done, it turns out if you pass a legislation within 2 weeks, it's much more likely to pass, right? Because people are angry. There's a lot of motivation. The problem is, or actually, not the problem. I'm going to qualify this because, when the complexities to this is that our systems are not designed to move very fast, and that's intentional. And my critique of this idea that we should move when people are really angry is that it doesn't produce good legislation. It produces legislation that's fueled by emotion and fueled by rhetoric, and it doesn't produce well meaning or well thought out legislation, right? So, take school shootings for example. Which leads actually to my next point. Take school shootings. Just because the people are really angry, is that going to create the best laws to prevent mass shootings? Could that potentially infringe on people's rights? There's all these different layers to this, and so I'm very uneasy when people want to say, let's pass this legislation really, really fast, because I'm like, wait a minute here. Our system is designed to move slow and methodical, so we don't just pass legislation because people are emotional. Our system is designed to do the opposite, and that's a good thing. Okay, moving on, talk about guns now. New York has sued the NRA and tried to disband them. Why are they doing this? Their report is that the NRA is grossly corrupt, and they're misusing their funds. And the report they published says it looks like it's pretty egregious, right? Wayne LaPierre's suits, spending $1,000 on suits. He's doing private jets all over the world for hunting trips and all different things, sending his family all over the world, yachts and things like that. And the problem is, if you're a nonprofit, you can't spend money like that. That's not good. That's illegal. You can't. You have to account for that. And it's not a private slush fund for Wayne LaPierre. And the NRA has been a sick organization for a long time. And the NRA is registered as a nonprofit in New York, and that's why New York is suing them. not because of their actions, not because of their legislative agenda. And so this is very problematic. Now the NRA is really lost a lot of its luster. They've been very, very powerful, and because of internal fighting and because of these what reported abuses, this has really degraded their efficacy. And so this is, in my opinion, they would do well to get rid of the head of the organization and reinvent themselves, but they don't seem to be doing that. Wayne LaPierre doesn't seem to be going anywhere. So, what does this mean for gun rights? I don't know. I don't know what the Second Amendment or for Second Amendment advocates. I don't know. I don't know if the loss of the NRA or the loss of their status is going to be that much of a detriment, or is it going to be or not? I don't know how that will play out. Moving on, Biden has a couple things. He's also picked a presidential candidate. I don't know why he hasn't. I don't know why he's stalling so much. It seems bizarre to me. I don't know if this is working in his favor or not. If his stalling is helping him get some coverage, or if this is designed, or this is hurting him because people are like, why can't he decide? I have no idea. It seems to me that I think is actually a detriment because of his lack of commitment, his lack of being able to commit to something. Biden's also laid out plans of what he's going to do in the first days of the presidency. He's going to stop the wall. He's going to do a lot of things that he can do to undo Trump, and which is what we would expect, right? Trump has been quite aggressive in doing things that he can without without Congress, and Biden will undo much of that, which is bizarre. Which is why I think it's somewhat bizarre that that many conservatives really advocate for the tactics that Trump has done. And this is not, I'm not critiquing on the substance of what Trump has done. I'm critiquing on his tactics. Donald Trump has done things unilaterally based upon the powers that he has. The problem with that, though, is that, the next president can just undo those same things very, very easily. And, so what gains have really been made? Unless he can legislate something, unless he can create a policy that's quite popular. And Trump hasn't done that. And so, I think that's a valid critique, or a pretty damning critique of Donald Trump's tactics. Lastly, Trump seeks to cut asylum at the southern border to almost nothing. And I point this out because Trump has tried to chip away at asylum and immigration as a whole. This is one of his big part of his presidency. And I point this out because this is a complicated issue. The rules on asylum were created during World War II, essentially, and that someone can just claim, hey, I'm here for asylum, and they get some time in the United States, and it's become actually a problem. People do abuse the system, and the problem is, what do we account for someone who needs asylum? Is there someone who experiences gang violence in their country need asylum? If we allowed everyone to come who experienced violence or some level of threat, then we would allow most of the world to come here. And so it poses a problem, and we can't. And it poses a problem of influx of people willing to make the travel, being abused on the way. There's layers upon layers upon layers of this. Now, the problem on the flip side, however, the Trump administration seems to be denying people without due process. And are they due process? That's an interesting question. I don't really know the answer to that. But this poses, it's not an easy solution, and the Trump administration has used tactics that are not beneficial to them, or that are aggressive, that are problematic. And so, what's the answer? I don't know. There's valid arguments for the Trump administration, their overall policies. The way those policies are implemented are problematic at times. So we'll just leave it at that. So that's it for this week. Thank you for listening, for the 3 of you who are listening. So I appreciate it. Thank you. I'll talk to you all next week.